Hey guys, this is Joe748, and I am here with SD1. SD1, how you doing?
Living the dream as always, Joe.
Is every day a dream? Every time we record a podcast, you say you're living the dream.
Well, that's because my podcasts are with you, sir.
Wow, okay, cool.
Yeah.
We have a special guest for you guys today. This is part of our AP adjacent AP life skills, just things that we want to bring to you guys that would be beneficial to all the players and members of the website. So we have Mollie Eastman with us. Mollie Eastman is a renowned sleep optimization expert, speaker, and the creator of Sleep is a Skill. It's a multifaceted platform dedicated to improving sleep health. Her mission is to spread the message that sleep is not just a biological necessity, but a skill that can be learned and refined. Mollie, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Can you give us a little bit of background on like what led up to you wanting to research and help others with their sleep?
Oh, yeah. I'm as surprised as anyone that I have an entire career in sleep because that was not my original intention. It really came from solving my own problem. I went through a period of insomnia while traveling internationally. And when I went to the doctors while we were traveling in various spots, so Croatia, Budapest, Italy, all spots ended in just giving me different types of sleeping pills and no real plan. And that was really concerning for me because I come from a family where a number of people in my family I saw go down the paths of pharmaceutical use and, really seeing some deleterious effects as a result. So that was a very scary time for me of like, what do we do here? What is the plan? And it wasn't even really working that well. I was, some taking this thing, still not really sleeping and just getting more and more frightened and scared along the way. So, that lit a fire to dive into what does it take to really get great sleep. The things I discovered completely changed the course of my own life. Namely, among them was this whole world of circadian rhythm entrainment and how we can actually entrain and strengthen our own circadian rhythm, quantum biology, chronobiology, the science of time and how time affects our biology. And so as a result, ended up starting this company, Sleep is a Skill. I was sharing with you before we hit record, have a niche in high stakes poker. So work with a lot of high stakes poker players. And I say that because they're a great example of people that are largely, at least for live action, in casinos designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. I'm sure you all can relate to this. So no windows, no clocks, lots of stimuli and lots of kind of confusion on even, is it day, is it night, like what's going on? And also the kind of potential stress load that could be there, whether for the excitement factor or for the loss factor. So navigating all those things and the fact that if they can make a difference with their sleep, it can make the argument that just about anyone can make a difference with their sleep.
Yes. Speaking about the casino environment and all those things, can you tell us what's happening biologically when they are cutting off those parts of your senses and trying to keep you in a bubble? Like what's happening internally?
Most people listening, even if they're in casinos or not, are closer to that sort of lifestyle than we might realize. So what I mean by that is that back in 2001, the EPA did a study and they found that the average American was spending well over 90% of their time indoors. And that was in 2001 before a global pandemic, Netflix, all these sort of things that might keep people inside. So when all of us are collectively kind of going indoors, whether casino or otherwise, that's divorcing us from these rhythms of nature, divorcing us from this very clear 24-hour cycle that we're really designed to be linked up with. And when we're not linked up with that 24-hour cycle, for one thing, our sleep-wake can start to get a little shaky. So the scheduling for that, so the automaticity of that. And if you think about it, so how this all works out is that in virtually every cell and organ in our body, we have trillions of clocks that all make up the body. And all these clocks want to stay on time. And they are kind of directed by our master conductor or suprachiasmatic nucleus that's in our brain. It's really closely connected to the eyes. And part of the reason that proximity matters is because the eyes are one of the things that takes in the signals of light, dark, and all that stimuli. And so when it's being told through either the presence of bright light or dim light sends a signal of what time it is. Bright light sends a signal of what time it is. Full spectrum light sends a signal of it gets very like the physics of light. And then, of course, as we start going into darkness and total darkness gives a signal of what time it is and what to be doing when. And if all of those signals are thrown off like they do, and like what happens when we go inside, and especially in a casino when there's absolutely no windows for the most part, there's no clocks, lots of activity, because presumably in nature, as hunter-gatherer tribes, we would have had more of a down regulatory effect in the evening. So when the sun would set, it gets dark, it's more quiet, we're like changing our behaviors, all of those and all certain types of signals. But we don't really get that in casinos. And we certainly also don't get that indoors as well. So that divorcing of those rhythms of nature, not just from like, oh, it's nice to be connected to the nature, but from a biological hardwired effect, throws off things like cortisol and melatonin, just to name two key hormones that affect your sleep.
Okay. Mollie, first of all, we should just rebook this whole thing. We need a long form podcast like Joe Rogan, like 3.5, 4 hours, because I don't even know where to start with you. But I want to start with like a base question based off of what you just said. So I'm currently reading a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and he quotes that before Edison created the light bulb, human beings slept an average of 11 hours a night. And I looked it up and it seemed to be accurate, but like now we're being told 7 is ideal. So let's just start with a base question there. What is an ideal amount of sleep to get?
So we have a lot of different questions around if you're going back in history of the difference. To your point, yes, it does seem unequivocal that we used to log a greater length or duration of hours previously, before the Industrial Revolution and the presence of electric light indoors. So that completely changed the landscape of sleep. And that's actually when we started logging and noting more sleep disorders, or the presence of sleep disorders. And that's when sleep as a field kind of started popping up, because it really wasn't an area before that. There's a great book called Mapping the Darkness that looks into this, that looks into kind of the history of sleep, which is fascinating. The presence of electric light has absolutely thrown off the rhythms and or circadian rhythms, or the type of sleep that we're getting, and becoming a real problem to what we used to do, which was no matter what either those hunter-gatherer tribes or the amount of sleep that you're talking about beforehand, was always what we believe more aligned with these rhythms and tethered in a way that now we've drifted from. And that drifting does seem to have real world consequences. And we know this through lots of research around shift workers in particular, that are doing really nothing different, but, just going to bed at different times and being active at different times than a lot of the rest of the population. And things that we see with those groups: heart disease, strokes, we see reproductive disorders, psychiatric disorders, obesity, diabetes, a number of things, as well as cancers. Namely, we certainly know about breast cancer and prostate cancer. So there's a number of things that really do seem to go awry when we deviate from these natural rhythms. That's a really long way to get to the answer of what you said. Today, 7 to 9 hours is what is actually proposed as the amount of sleep for a healthy adult. Now, 7 to 9 hours is certainly a big range. And on top of that, it's kind of what's known as like a U-shaped curve, where you can have people dripping on either side, kind of coupled closely to there. So there could be some people that a little less than 7 is still okay for them. And there could be some people that require a little bit more than 9.
Gotcha.
So yeah, you just said that it's not, don't focus so much on the duration. What should we be focusing on or looking for?
So one, it's not to step over the need for duration. So if people come my way and they're sleeping, and I will see this, people purport to be sleeping 3, 4, 5 hours a night. Certainly we want to address that for sure. With that U-shaped curve, while there might be some kind of drippings on either side, closely coupled to the 7 to 9 hours, once we start going much less than that or much more than that, we start to see and question what's going on for that individual. So duration is absolutely going to be a factor. We just don't want people to have false kind of goals that they're trying to strive for. Like, oh, well, I should be getting 9 hours, 10 hours because Roger Federer or someone is getting them. Instead, we want to see, what do you need? So determining your unique sleep need, important. Basically seeing how many wake-ups you're having throughout the course of the night. This is known as sleep fragmentation. And seeing with those wake-ups, is it kind of in still the same realm of healthy and normal, because wake-ups are totally healthy and normal to a certain extent, but are we starting to step over into multiple wake-ups a night and difficulty falling back asleep thereafter? That can start to fall in the domain of what's known as insomnia, so difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Or could we be stepping over potential sleep disorders? There's over 100 sleep-wake disorders, and many people are running around undiagnosed. I see this with a lot of poker players too, that will have a lot of diagnoses of things like sleep apnea or upper airway resistance syndrome that can totally change the game for your sleep quality. So sleep fragmentation, so sleep duration, sleep consistency. This is a huge one and a challenge often for some of the people that I'm working with in the casinos, depending on when they're able to get their play or their live action time. So for them, what we're trying to do is, in the midst of kind of potentially chaos, how can we bring about more consistency? Because sleep loves consistency. And if you get nothing else out of what I'm saying for today, part of the beauty of aligning with these rhythms of nature is that it creates its own external consistency kind of realm. So if we think about the fact that in history, we would have been for many, millions of years, largely sleeping outside. And if we slept outside, the natural alarm would have been the presence of the sun rising. And with the light exposure and with that light comes temperature change. So you would be warming up the environment and lighting up the environment. So you just kind of always naturally get up pretty close to when the sun would be rising. And then the presence of that dropping and then the temperature dropping, that would signal to the body that we're going to be going to sleep in the near future.
Jumping off of what you just said. So in 2025, human beings, especially Western civilization, we love our data. And we have all these wearables and like my bed. You mentioned some of the metrics, like my bed clocks heart rate, HRV, breath rate, and it really is keen on duration, efficiency, and timing. But one thing you mentioned is we shouldn't get so focused on hitting necessarily what these metrics say is, quote, ideal for us. So how do I know what is ideal for me? Is it just a feeling, an energy thing throughout the day? What is it? What tells me that I'm hitting the right marks for my body?
Yeah, so good. I'm assuming that's probably the 8 mattress or the 8 sleep topper potentially. Or do you have another?
I have a sleep number.
Okay, great. The presence of some of these can be so fantastic because we can start to learn more about our specific types of sleep, what we're seeing night after night, and then when we start deviating. What most of them are doing is using that same range of 7 to 9 hours and starting to learn about you and seeing when you do deviate from that, if suddenly you're getting way less, if suddenly you're getting way more, but also kind of weighting what we seem to know of the need of getting around that 7 to 9 hours. So one, we're starting to learn, what does it look like if we are getting more consistent sleep? So for example, I have a number of people that will come my way and they'll say, oh, I feel great when I get, the weekends, they'll sleep in and they'll get like 10 hours or 9 hours or something, because now they're not having to wake up for a particular thing. And the rest of the week, they're waking up after 6 hours or something. The problem with that is that can be a bit of a coping mechanism. And so you might falsely think that, oh, I need those 9-10 hours to feel functional. And yet that might just be the way you've been coping thus far. And instead, if we start to bring in a consistent wake up time around 7 days a week, which is surprisingly rare. And I'll say that many people say, yeah, pretty consistent, whatever. But then we look at their stats, their sleep stats, and almost always, very commonly, we see that, yeah, maybe they are fairly consistent 5 days a week, but then Saturday, Sunday, or certain times where they're not beholden to certain requirements or wake up times, then they're sleeping in or changing around those schedules, and then they're logging more. And so that accordion model method, what we want to do is start to compress that sleep-wake scheduling and then start to see what shakes out. So if you were to actually consistently wake up at, say, 7 a.m. or something, then what shakes out is what becomes the body's pull for your particular sleep need. That's what we'd start to see, instead of sort of these coping mechanisms of the sleep-in methods and naps and other things that people might do to kind of work around, or coffee, alcohol, whatever, all these different ways to kind of get by. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I want to just like sort of paint the picture for you of like our typical, possibly typical listener. We're at the casino, we're playing until maybe about 1:32 in the morning. The evening ends with like a manager coming over with 4 security guards, and it's a really high conflict situation. They're telling you to leave and they're trespassing you. And then you leave the casino, you go to Denny's, you eat the sriracha burger, and you go to bed at your Super 8 in some random town in the US, and you rinse and repeat every day. What can be done to make things more regulated in that kind of lifestyle?
I would put them often in a category of sort of shift workers. And if you are a shift worker, I mentioned all those things that could come up from a health perspective. But if we can make it as much of kind of this lifestyle as possible, we can really help mitigate some of those things. And when I say lifestyle, I just mean bringing as much consistency to that sort of way of living as we can, and bringing this circadian aligned approach, even if it becomes more of a faux environment. So meaning, say if you start to shake out that most of the time, in order to get the food in, get all the time in the casino, whatever, that you're usually going to bed by 3 a.m. or something. If we can start to make that's when you pretty much always go to bed is 3 a.m. and you pretty much always wake up at whatever time you wake up, then we make that a kind of devoid from morality or like there's something wrong with it. Really embrace it from a place of, no, I'm going to really covet this, that this is a workable solution that around 7 days a week, I still get up at my whatever, 11 a.m. or something. And so we reverse engineer that. So say if we have this new 11 a.m. wake up time, that's when we want to start playing with your light exposure, even if we're still using some faux kind of bright light stimulus at different points, depending on what's available to you, using red lights at certain times, using blue blockers at certain times, down regulation techniques, definitely meal timing being a big one. So I have a lot of poker players wearing CGM, so like this one, so continuous glucose monitor, so we can see, because exactly what you pointed to, like after all that action, then you go and then you eat late, that's definitely going to throw off some of our sleep quality. But not only that, it affects our ability to fall asleep. We had one of the top researchers in kind of meal timing and circadian health. So Dr. Sachin Panda, if anyone wants to go into this, out of the Salk Institute, fascinating research, decades of research. And he wrote the book Circadian Code. And one of the things that he found is that when you are kind of turning on the pancreas, then you are inhibiting the body's ability to create sufficient melatonin in the way that it normally would. So it's just throwing off those signals, but we can start to more front load our caloric intake earlier. And that actually can help with the way we're showing up from a productivity standpoint and cognition standpoint as well. And that CGM can help to make sure we're not spiking and crashing, because we do tend to be less adept or able to utilize glucose as the day goes on. So as you eat later, say you have the exact same meal from wherever at 1 a.m. versus 1 p.m., you're much easier able to handle that at 1 p.m. than you are at 1 a.m. because of that circadian nature from some of those clocks. And those are biologically hardwired because we are diurnal creatures, meaning we're meant to be active by day and at rest at night. And so because of that kind of coding to be at rest at night, the type of hormones that are released and the things that are at play really don't play well with eating at that time and doing certain other things at that time.
Like if someone goes to bed at 2 a.m., like after a long session at the casino, how much time do you think is a safe amount of window to not eat before 2 a.m.? Like when should the last meal be?
So in general, what is kind of proposed is, say if we did land on, that you're going to bed at say 3 or 4 or something, then we would try to make it so that always your last bite of food is at least around 3 hours before bed. But that is the conservative amount that we hear. And I will just say anecdotally, I know we still need more research, et cetera, but from those in the more wearable kind of conversation. So we have one of the larger Oura Ring databases of sleep optimization users. So we get to see lots and lots of data. Also, the Whoop band puts out a lot of information and research around what they discover from their users. And one of Whoop's findings was that 4 hours before bed, having their last bite of food was far superior than the groups that were having their last bite of food around 2 hours before bed. And beyond that, I would say that we even still see benefits for people when it's more like 5, 6 hours before bed. Now, again, this is something that you want to test for yourself, bioindividuality. That's where the continuous glucose monitors can come in and see where your metabolic health is at. But that can be something we're striving towards.
Yeah, consequently, like this is a big topic of discussion in the fitness industry as well. Like Dr. Peter Attia, he puts all his patients on the glucose monitoring as well, like even his healthy patients. And the glucose spikes seem to have a lot to do with visceral fat retention, but also they think it's closely tied to how glucose spikes impact sleep and how your brain doesn't get washed and what happens during sleep really impacts you physiologically, which leads to what you said, like heart disease, cancer, things of that nature spiking even more too.
Absolutely. Yeah. One exciting thing for that is if people are like, what is this continuous glucose monitor thing? This sounds like so out there. What's exciting is that in the United States, just the past few months, we can now get continuous glucose monitors with no prescription, and you can order them like online and super affordably. One that I'm having a lot of people use and I have no affiliation with them is Lingo, and that's from Abbott. And so Abbott Libre. And so that one is only now like $49 and no prescription. You order it in 2 seconds and then it comes to your door in like a couple days. That is one. Also, Dexcom came out with one too. They're just a little bit shorter of a time, around like 10 days as opposed to 14 days. But either one that you go with, the fact that you don't have to have that hindrance, now I anticipate we'll see so many more people starting to track this. And what tends to happen from a sleep perspective is I have people put these on, and then in the wee hours in the morning, tons of crashing going on. And then they're waking up when it's crashing because, what is that signal to the body? Oh, it's like a stressor and kind of a stress response. Cortisol amps up. So some of these kind of wake promoting hormones to deal with this problem of the body. And now you're not only awake, but now you're having trouble falling back asleep and you're just kind of laying there.
So around 200 BC, a famous Roman is recorded complaining about the sundial being invented and how it's stealing hours from his day. So like tech, like back then that was tech. With all the tech that we have, and then like since 2007 with Netflix and the iPhone coming out, what about during our waking hours? So if we're on a good rhythm, great. Are some of the things in the world that we live in now impacting sleep cycle, even if it's happening during wake hours, like all of the stealing of time and the digital interaction and the different constant blue light, things of that nature? Like, what is that doing to our sleep, even if we do keep a good schedule?
Yeah, so true. Oh my gosh. And I love that reference. It's so perfect in alignment with the fact that we just went through the shift to daylight saving time. Another, kind of man-made invention of just shifting clocks just because, yes, that there's a number of things that we're doing in modernity that are messing with our sleep. So our programs and the way we work with people is all from this framework of sort of this circadian rhythm entrainment. And it looks at aiming to kind of peel back those layers that aren't working. So we start with the light dark timing piece that we were discussing before. We start there because we know that that's one of the most weighted and important Zeitgebers, and Zeitgebers stand for time givers. So things that are telling the body something about what time it is and what to be doing when. So that light dark being number one, kind of nestled with there is we look at our sleep wake timing like we're discussing. But that's kind of the anchor piece that we begin with. But then we move into things like, for instance, temperature timing is something that is now different than how we would have lived in the past. And I mentioned how before, when we lived outside, we likely would have been exposed to much warmer temperatures by day. So like I'm talking to you all outside, so it's much hotter out here than it is indoors with the temperature controlled environment and what have you. So I'm being exposed to that temperature as it rises. But then the marked drop in the evening sends a whole slew of signals to the body of, the fact that now we're going to set ourselves up to transition to sleep in coming hours. So we can at least bring a dynamic nature to our temperature indoors too. So the same way, and I fully anticipate that we'll start to see in the future circadian aligned homes from a building biology standpoint. And that so we'll have circadian aligned lighting, and that will kind of just happen. we'll have circadian line temperature shifts, and that will just sort of happen. But for right now, it's not doing that. So you have to kind of manually do this if you have it available to you. So if you can just kind of turn up the temperature a little bit by day to sort of mimic what would be happening outside, and then turn it down by night. But then it can keep going. So we look at meal timing, meal type. We look at exercise timing, exercise type. We look at something of thought timing, is something I've kind of referred to because of the fact that our thoughts exist on a circadian rhythm. And so we have evidence to support they have very different types of thoughts in the wee hours of the morning than you do by day. And sadly, things like suicidality rates go up in the wee hours of the morning, and kind of real world consequences based on those different ways of thinking. And then lastly, chronopharmacology, so the timing of our drugs, and the drugs can be as banal as, coffee, THC, alcohol, or bringing in prescription drugs.
What can we do after we leave the casino like 2 a.m. and then we get to our hotel to start winding down properly?
Okay, so part of this can begin earlier on. So if we are getting you some of that bright light exposure when you first wake up, that's actually going to help you wind down later, kind of paradoxically. And so when you get that first bright shot of light first thing in the morning, then you can almost imagine like an invisible countdown clock that around 16 hours or so later, then you're going to start getting that kind of sleepiness effects that happen. So that's part of it. If we more kind of bring about more exhaustion, movement, all these sort of high wake promoting activities, your meal timings all happened on front loaded, exercise timing's been front loaded, even the thought timing, so the cognitive load. So we've taken on all those things. And then, so by the time you get in the evening, if you can shift over to blue blockers, the environment being like red lights or incandescent bulbs or what have you, those are all going to help depending on the timeline. So for some people, warm exposure, so having like a hot shower or like a warm shower, hot bath, you really do want at least an hour to 2 hours before bed for that, ideally. So it depends on how much time you do have for yourself when you do get back. But that does have evidence to support that seems to then have a paradoxical cooling effect thereafter. And then, of course, if you can make your environment as cool as possible, also that fasting piece, if we haven't been eating for a stretch of time, can be a helpful one. So definitely skipping that after play time to then go eat. If we could move that back somehow, or just bring your food, or however you got to work that out, those things can all definitely help.
So a casino environment, there's slot machines everywhere. There's probably a ton of blue light involved in that. So in the evenings, would it be beneficial to be wearing blue light blocking glasses in the evening at the table when we're in that environment? I mean, the table's not going to have a whole lot, but it's going to be artificial light for sure. But I don't know, would that be something that would help?
Yeah. And now this is a little dicey. How I have some of our poker players manage it is a bit of a case-by-case basis. So meaning you could across the board say, yeah, just wear those and that's going to help you fall asleep with more ease. You're just going to be not as exposed to some of those stimulating light sources. However, I will say that I've had some people that are final tabling and, they're towards the end of tournaments and what have you. And so we want to bring full cognition and kind of wake promotion to that moment. And so we're almost willing to have a little bit of the hit in that night of sleep, or the ability to kind of fall asleep if it's at the tail end, or certain athletes that they're not having to do multiple nights of play. It's just like a one-off and this is their big night for that week or something. If it's really important, we could make the argument that we might just want to bring all cognitive abilities to that, because what is happening when we are getting exposed to some of that bright blue light is wake promoting, but it is layered because that blue light does bring about a bit more cortisol release. And that's why even the presence of blue light can affect your glucose regulation, which is really fascinating. And you can see that with continuous glucose monitors. So I would say, like all, kind of thoughtful things, we do want to kind of weigh what's going on for that individual and what's at stake for them. Do we want to kind of bring some of that like adrenaline and oomph to that play? Or is this just a lifestyle that we're bringing about? And if so, if we can bring those blue blockers in toward the end. Also, there are blue blockers that are can give you kind of steps to bring in. So meaning there's one brand called Viva Rays that has 3 different lenses. So, and they're magnets. So you can just kind of plop them on or off. So you could start with yellow, which are more kind of daytime, lighter blocking of blue. Then you can move into maybe later on progressively into the night, then the orange. Then if you're like heading on out and you're looking to kind of start winding everything down, assuming you're not driving, maybe Uber or something, then you put on the red lenses, and those are like really, really more intense. So those could be ways that you could kind of play with how much you're getting in that conversation or not.
Yeah, we need peak cognition while if we're counting cards, we need peak cognition for sure.
Could you kind of paint the picture of like the worst sleeping patient, like the habits, like, drinking coffee at 9 p.m. and I'm eating the Denny's burger at 1 a.m. and I'm scrolling my phone right before bed? Like, what are the worst things that we're doing?
Okay, so I would say there's a couple categories here. Distinguishing between the insomniac, so the person that has difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, and the person that maybe isn't prioritizing or thinking about their sleep as much, or it's kind of low down on their rung of priorities. Those we approach really differently and we see very different results. So meaning the insomniac, and I do see this with certain poker players that are just stressed out to the max or what have you, that now they've kind of burnt out that stress response and that down regulation, and they want to sleep and they're trying everything and they're not getting that sleep. And so they're having difficulty falling asleep. They're waking up a bunch. So there is that group, and that can be something where we can see lots of things go awry with the quality of their sleep. And that's kind of a more stress response piece. We might bring in things like CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or ACT, or ACTI, acceptance commitment therapy for insomnia. So that's that group. Then for the person that's just maybe hasn't been thinking about their sleep or just feels like they have circumstances in the way of getting their sleep, then yes, the kind of upside down lifestyle where maybe they're waking up late. And I was guilty of a lot of these. I would be waking up super late. Then I would be like, ugh, feeling awful and just zombie-like. So I would keep all the lights down and I don't feel good. I'm like headachy or whatever. So I'm not getting any sort of bright light until way later into the day. And now I'm doing the exact opposite of what nature would do. Now I'm flipping on all these bright lights as like the day progresses into the night. And then now I'm having late coffee and eating late and maybe alcohol or all these different things that then skew the body out and hit at my ability to get restored and rested sleep. So those things are all play. Then the other piece that I see a lot, and I would say that I think that this will get really disrupted in the future, is so many people with undiagnosed sleep disorders. And so now they're compounding all of these things. And so what I would see and what I would put out there is that I would like to see every single person tested for sleep disorders, but not just once, but multiple times throughout your life. Because even if you test once, just you gain a little weight, your hormones shift, certain things can then have you develop sleep disorders where there weren't sleep disorders before. And also that goes into kind of nutritional deficiencies. Other things could show up like restless leg, periodic limb movement disorder, et cetera. So having all of those at play and those kind of poor habits can, really make for some funky sleep for sure.
What's late coffee? What is considered late? And then also, what impact does alcohol have on our sleep? Like yesterday was my birthday, and I had a cocktail last evening, and I see this every time. My heart rate is elevated like 9 or 10 points every time when I have one drink. So what should we do if we're not a person that's like, okay, I'm not going to get rid of alcohol completely, although that's probably the best thing we could ever do for our bodies. And then what is late coffee? What does that look like?
Okay, so the coffee one has a bit of bioindividuality because there are slow metabolizers and fast metabolizers. You can check this with DNA tests, but then you can also kind of subjectively see, are you someone that's much more sensitive or not? And so what I'd say with that is that some people can get away with pushing it a little bit later. And when I say a little bit later, for the vast majority of people, that might look like, 2 p.m., maybe people, if they need a little bit earlier, kind of 12 p.m., that sort of thing. So like a few hours after awakening, if we can kind of keep that tethered to that first half of the day, seems to have a lot of benefits. But I would say that's much more of a testing piece and seeing, especially if you are using wearables, you can get more information on that one. But the one that's way more clear is alcohol, 110%. It's one of the lowest hanging fruits that I see for people that we can just swiftly, completely transform their sleep, especially if they are, routinely drinking. And like you said, it was so perfect, like one drink. I mean, historically, we might not have thought that that was that crazy, but then when you see those numbers of just what a difference it makes. And I think it's also mining the data too, because some people say, oh, look, I actually slept better when I drank or what have you. But then you look on the other side of some of those nervous system components. So you look at what you said, the heart rate, you look at heart rate variability, you look at respiratory rate, you look at body temperature. For some people, spilling over to blood oxygen, and certainly often sleep fragmentation, then you can see a whole other story. And I will say that in the research, sleep onset does seem to be improved with alcohol. So your ability to fall asleep with, the speed, but that's about it. And then it goes all awry after that. And same with THC. So you tend to fall asleep a bit faster, but then certain problems emerge with THC for sleep commonly. So with all that, yes, alcohol is something that if we can start to, one, push it earlier. So I'm a fan of like boozy brunch or at the latest sort of like happy hours or whatever.
I had a question about the whole awakening light thing. If we're at the motel or whatever, and we're drawing the blinds because we're going to sleep at 3 a.m. and we have to wake up at 11 a.m. checkout, what should we do to introduce the light? Like, is it fine to just wake up with the alarm at 10:59 and then open the shades? Is that enough, or does it need to be like cracked or something to get more light slowly?
We do want you to get unadulterated light in your eyes and on your skin. So that means that we want you to, if you can, open the window, then getting the physics of that light totally changes. This also applies if you're like in a car. If you can roll down the window, it's going to make a whole different set of signals to the body than getting light through the windows. So like I have these windows here. These are going to cut out a whole spectrum of that full spectrum light. So I'm outside, so I get all the full spectrum light. But as it's going in through these windows, the person on the other side is only going to get a lot of kind of blue filtered light. And it's going to massively reduce the amount of lux that's present. And you can test all this with things like My Circadian app is an app that you can use, or there's other lux meter apps, and you just hold it up and you can test the lux. So I would say if you're waking up right around that 11 a.m., then maybe make this a little fun game, at least in the beginning, just to get yourself connected to it. So you go outside, you test the lux in the environment. You see, oh my gosh, it's like 18,000 lux outside, 100,000 lux outside. And then you go inside, and commonly most indoor environments are sub maybe 1,000 lux, often sub like 800 lux. So that's telling a whole different set of signals to the body, not to mention as the day progresses and you have opportunity to get UVB. UVB helps you support the production of vitamin D, and vitamin D is a precursor, or helps support getting serotonin, which is a precursor to melatonin. So, and most people in the United States are, and I say most for real, like the majority of people are deficient in vitamin D. So that's already setting them up for a whole slew of problems, certainly with their sleep, but also mood and other things, a cascading effect. So just getting yourself outside will be a big deal. If you can crack that window, that's going to at least be a good kind of in between. But I also have people, and I know it's hard at casinos, but as much as you possibly can, like on breaks and what have you, getting outside. Sometimes that can be a long walk, I know, but just getting yourself to get some of that bright light exposure, and even just a few minutes can be helpful for that.
Okay. So I'm just looking for like the top 4 or 5 things, because again, like what Joe said in the beginning, all of this is amazing. The research that we have now and understanding biologically how we work. A lot of the amazing stuff you're suggesting is damn near impossible with the life that we live. So what would be like your top 4, 5, 6, 3, whatever you want to do, things that we could do with a generally erratic schedule, being in casinos, pushing our brains late at night that we could do to help our sleep health?
Yeah. To both help your sleep health and help your play, if we can start actually counterintuitively for many people, if we even move up, like move later the time that we're going to bed. And, this is very confusing because for the average population, I'm usually not saying this, but for this group, if you want to be able to have kind of all your cognition intact and not be starting to be kind of sleepy, slowing down, because our brain activity is going to look a lot different, like just an hour, a couple hours before bed than it is a little bit earlier. So for some people, we really actually start moving their bedtime, wake time later. And then throughout history, the goal is to get brighter days and darker nights. And so if you can even artificially do that, that's what we're looking to kind of support. Some of the companies that I like for this, one is Chroma, and they have something called the Sky Portal. And the Sky Portal can get you some bright light depending on what time it is before you're going in. So you can kind of be exposed to some of that can help you fall asleep later, even if it's like all kinds of upside down times. And then we can shift over also to using, for sure, any shift worker. I really want them using infrared light. So red light panels at certain times throughout the day, because you're often going to be devoid of sufficient infrared if you've been sleeping through some of the daytime. So we want to kind of be dosing that. That's going to help with mitochondrial health, your health in general, and your ability to sleep.
Are those portable? Can they be because we travel a lot?
Yeah, you can get portable ones for sure. So you can get smaller ones. Flex Beam is one that can travel and can kind of flex around if you want to do like the thyroid, the gut. So the gut has a big production of your serotonin in the gut. So there can be certain things that you could use while traveling. And then there's little like cube ones, and like they can be flat. You can use them intranasally. So you can even travel with ones that go up the nose into the brain, which depending on, so for cognition, also TBIs, this can be really helpful. Mental health issues, which sometimes can emerge the later we are going to bed. All of those things can be supportive. So definitely getting yourself some red light is key. But then how can you even artificially create brighter days and darker nights? So getting yourself some really quality blue blockers, and you can really check this, and they don't have to be expensive, but just making sure that they actually are cutting blue light. So you would hold them up and then check the blue light in the environment and make sure you can't see those. Then also some behavioral interventions. So kind of starting to play with your ability to upregulate by day, and then how can you downregulate more intentionally by night? So have some kind of practices, almost like when we sleep train a baby or something. How can we sleep train ourselves to kind of calm in the evenings? And you can also play with other kind of, if you will, biohacker-esque things with cold plunging, saunas, other things that can help support kind of inflammation and other patterns.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mollie, for helping us and giving us all these tips to get better sleep. Where can people go to find if they want a deeper dive on all this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. Yes, so they can go to sleepisaskill.com, and at sleepisaskill.com, they can do a bunch of things. They can take a sleep assessment and get information right away on things that they can do to help support their sleep. They can sign up for our sleep newsletter. It's been going out for every Monday for over 6 years, never missed a Monday. So I'd love to have people on there. We have a sleep podcast. We're the #2 sleep podcast. So over 200 something episodes of different sleep experts sharing different ways that you can help support your sleep. And then we have online courses, cohorts, one-on-ones, wearable audits, and other things that we can do to get you really trained in the skill set around sleep. And I'm really passionate about this because I think for myself, I just dodged a bullet by, could have very easily gone down the path of like sleeping pills for the rest of my life and all these different things. And I don't want for people to have that experience. And then even for people that just, don't know what's available on the other side of great sleep, and they might be running around with whatever, sleep apnea or just habits that aren't serving them, their whole life can look different on the other side.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. And if we see a bunch of casino surveillance photos of Advantage players wearing blue blockers, we know that they've all listened to your podcast. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if you guys want to learn more about card counting, you can visit our website, blackjackapprenticeship.com, or visit our YouTube channel at Blackjack Apprenticeship.